welcome everyone to another episode of the Khalis Podcast, a platform to share the works and thoughts of both aspiring and established writers, poets, artists, and activists who are passionate about preserving and furthering Sikh and Punjabi heritage and identity. Today, I'm joined by Hardeep Kaur Shergill, an educator for the Toronto District School Board. Hardeep is also completing a PhD from the University of Toronto in social justice education under the supervision of Dr. George Day, where she is examining anti-racism in early years. We're going to be talking about Hardeep's debut publication, Manmeet Kaur, My Story About 1984, which is a fantastic storybook that was published by Khalis House on the 3rd of April, 2025. So Hardeep, welcome to the Khalis Podcast. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ
Thank you for joining me. I know there is a time difference of 5 hours, but I'm looking forward to finally having this conversation, long overdue. So yeah, thank you for taking the time to join me. I thought we'd start just by asking a bit about your background, if you would like to share with our viewers and our listeners, your background, your journey into becoming a children's author. How did all of that come about?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful for your time and for Khalis House to publish Manmeet Kaur, a story that's so dear to my heart. So my name is Hardeep Kaur Shergill. I'm an elementary school educator and a Ph.D. candidate at the University of Toronto. My Sikh faith guides my passion for anti-racist and anti-oppressive education, along with the actionizing of it. I grew up in a very underserved community called Rexdale in the community of Toronto. And it's located in Canada. For those of you that are outside of Canada, from a young age, because of my lived experiences, I was acutely aware of the injustices, racial and economic disparities that exist because of my background growing up in Rexdale, Ontario. This ignited a very fierce passion within me to disrupt ongoing coloniality, racism, and economic injustice, particularly within education systems. I've always had an interest in becoming a children's author. In fact, I wrote Manmeet Kaur, My Story About 1984, when I was 20 years old. I've always enjoyed writing and along with pursuing scholarly research, hence my academic side. Um, but it wasn't until the past few years, within these years, that I took a very serious dive into the field of children's literature and began considering my options. One of my brothers knew that I wrote Manmeet Kaur way, way back in the day and even had illustrations for it. I wrote it for an undergraduate course, believe it or not. And he suggested that I reach out to the World Sikh Organization to assist with the publication of it. And the rest, as they say, is history. I'm thrilled to announce that my second children's book will be published by Khalis House soon. But if it wasn't for WSO and Khalis House Ranveer, such as yourself, I wouldn't be here, sitting here and talking about Manmeet Kaur and where it is today.
Yeah, I remember you when you submitted the actual proposal. I remember you mentioned that the actual story of Manmeet Kaur was written quite a while ago, and it just kind of sat, as I guess life took over. So you mentioned, so when did you actually write it?
So I'm gonna show my age. So I'm an elder millennial, and so I wrote it when I was 20 years old, when I was
Right.
doing my undergraduate degree, and it was for a course. Oh, even remember the course. It was the course called The Psychology of Death and Dying. I still
Right.
remember it, and the professor's name. Look, it's all coming back to me. Dr. Stephen Fleming. Oh my gosh. And I remember because at that time I was really learning more about Sikh history, Sikh philosophy, uh, reclaiming my Sikh identity. Because as we know, uh, growing up, I was born and raised here, so there's the Western and Eastern hemispheres that are really influencing us. And I was yearning for that identity piece. Um, and of course, my background in growing up in an underserved neighborhood. My parents were factory workers and really made sure that we had food on the table, my brothers and I. And so taking a serious dive into our history, particularly 1984, ignited that passion. Hey, there's not a story out there. Why not infuse it within this assignment and let it be where it ends up? But it sat on my shelf for all these years until my brother told me and encouraged me to publish.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, obviously we'll go into the book in a while, especially about because of the subject matter that the book covers. It can be difficult sometimes to write something for a younger audience. But, the themes that emerge from the book. We'll cover that in just a second. But before we do, the I wanted to ask you what your kind of earliest memory is of reading a children's book, and then does that tie into maybe your inspiration behind writing Manmeet Kaur?
Yeah, I would say that. So I was one of those striving readers. I did not learn how to read until I was in grade two. And I remember just looking at the pictures. So my earliest memory of reading a children's book was, believe it or not, Beauty and the Beast. And it was about 6 or 7 years old. And that's when I'm going to give my age away. That's when Beauty and the Beast from Disney actually came out. And it was a tale that was hugely popular with the younger kids at that time. And I remember how vivid the illustrations were and how they captivated my interest. And because I was a striving reader, still learning how to decode words, I learned to use the pictures to assist me with understanding what was happening in the text, even before I actually knew or watched the movie Beauty and the Beast. Um, so that really assisted me with becoming a vivacious reader, so to say. That book was just captivating, and I still have it in my library. My inspiration behind Manmeet Kaur has to do with my own learning about Sikh history, my journey to reclaim my Punjabi Sikh indigeneity. Being born and raised in Toronto, like I said, has led to an internal struggle between the Eastern and Western worlds, where Eurocentrism permeates throughout all facets of Canadian history. And based on that, the notions of multicentric possibilities are ignored. For example, our histories continue to be ignored, along with other forms of history, racialized histories. The consequences, as a consequence, we don't know about our own ancestral heritages and origins. So growing up, as I was learning more about Sikh history, I learned about the 1984 Sikh genocide perpetuated by the Indian government. I remember it was in high school, I was actually the English editor of the youth section for a local newspaper called Sansevita. And so I wrote articles about the Indian government and the oppressive tactics that are being used to marginalize Sikh communities. I remember feeling anger and despair, knowing that justice has not been rendered to the victims. Furthermore, Sikhs are continued to be marginalized and viewed as terrorists by the Indian government to this day, particularly those that advocate for a sovereign homeland called Khalistan. Um, I wanted to write back as my mentor and my supervisor, Dr. George Day Nana, encourages us. Many people are not aware of the historical specificities um, of 1984. And I wanted people, I wrote this book because I wanted Sikhs and non-Sikhs to learn more about Sikh identity. Sikh students deserve to have their identities affirmed along with their histories. And Manmeet Kaur came to be as a way for me not to only bring awareness of the 1984 Sikh genocide, but also including joy and resistance. Part of anti-oppressive work is not just, and you and I talked about this before, focusing on the oppressive side, but also to bring forth that resilience, the perseverance, and the joy that comes along with it. And because time is going on and I'm getting older, the newer generations, I also want to educate them about our genocide that happened to us, where the victims continue to exist to this day, where families were destroyed, but yet they have not been rendered the peace and justice they deserve. So I will say, even talking about this, I know that is dangerous in today's age because we have Indian government agents operating in Canada. Um, so I know me saying this, and some people will be watching as well to the spot podcast, that speaking out and speaking up puts you in their way of targeting me, but we got to do what we got to do.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's so commendable that you acknowledge that, because it is a reality that many of us face in the diaspora. Um, but just I wanted to go back to the actual book. So you mentioned there that you were quite mindful of the fact that you wanted to pass on this knowledge to the next generation. But as we know, November '84, whether you're talking about June or whether you're talking about the year as a whole, it's often difficult. I mean, I've got children and I find it difficult to kind of convey what took place because it was so horrific. Most of us would have read the accounts that have been detailed and preserved by organizations like NSAF and others that are doing some really good work. And obviously it's very horrific and it's very kind of traumatic, so, reading, kind of relearning all of that. So how difficult was it for you to express the story that you've written, given the subject matter, given the fact that it does talk about genocide and killing and looting? How did what kind of methods did you employ to make it accessible for the target audience?
And one of the that's a very excellent question because it is every time I read this book, it I get very emotional because it's such a deep such a deep portrayal of a young girl and how she loses her father, but also towards healing and
Yeah,
resistance. And so I think my background as an educator, particularly within anti-oppressive and anti-racist education, I'm quite aware of the delicacy and the balance that over the years I've learned being having been an educator for over a decade, on how to really make sure that it's I don't want to say developmentally appropriate because even that term itself, many people who are against diversity, education, and inclusion work use that as an excuse not to include stories, identity affirming stories, let's say. So I would
right,
say it was a delicate balance for me to show his history and then also being mindful of the ways in which uh, to conduct it with a trauma infused stance, so to
right,
say. And, we in Canada, we celebrate Terry Fox. So every year, schools celebrate Terry Fox, and Terry Fox unfortunately lost his life to cancer. And death is involved in that. But
right.
yet, schools celebrate that, even
Sure.
though, kindergarten kids ages 4 and 5 have to learn about death at that age.
Right.
So it's a very, very delicate balance, but um, it the intricate balance of teaching youngsters about race, ethnicity, identity, because I've had a vast experience of it, I I just created spaces within the book that okay, there's this trauma happening to Manmeet, but then how can we overcome that trauma? For example, journaling, talking it out.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping that when young readers, for whom it's targeted for, read it, they also, I'm sure emotions, big feelings will arise. But I'm hoping that some of the tools that Manmeet uses to help her cope with her father's loss, that
Yeah.
the reader can also use that as well. Um, but it was an intricate balance of ensuring that I did the story justice and
Yeah.
as it pertains to the historical accuracy of 1984,
Yeah.
and also incorporate our resistance to persecution
Right.
and our resilience as a community. I
Yeah.
remember reaching out to a few publishing companies, and because Sikh histories are not very highlighted, and because unfortunately our identities are thrusted into a South Asian monolithic group, not many people are aware of who we are. And I was told by a couple of them that they weren't interested in publishing this book at this moment in time. Um, I'm just inferring perhaps it was too controversial for them, or maybe
Yeah.
it's because it honors racialized stories. Who knows? But that's up to me, left as a writer, to wonder and ponder. But I let that fuel me even more, um, to reach out and, because the story is so important. Thankfully, I was able to get in touch with Khalis House, who jumped at the opportunities, such as Ranveer yourself, to get this story out. But it was originally Balpreet Singh from World Sikh Organization I reached out to, and without his assistance, I would not be able to have this story published. So, Balpreet, if you're watching, thank you. It's a community. I wouldn't be here without people who have guided me and those that came before me, our ancestors. So that's I'm grateful. No accomplishment, no success is done alone. It's through community.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you've covered a lot of really important points there as well, especially with regards to like storytelling and also like specifically on 84 and specifically on the genocide. Maybe sometimes we're guilty of perhaps wrapping our kids in cotton wool and not exposing them to that. I think there's like you said, it's an intricate balance, right? Because you don't want to re-traumatize them. It has to be trauma informed or trauma infused. But they learn about death and violence within school anyway, within different contexts and different histories. And if other mainstream publishers or other outlets or even schools are not telling them about this history, then really it does become our responsibility as a community to not just tell the stories, but actually own the narrative, because within that you can then fuse in the themes of resilience and resistance, which is something I really liked about this story. That although you're talking about the horrific violence that occurs and the death of Manmeet's father, there is it kind of ends towards her healing and that moment for the reader to reflect upon that. And like you've said there, whether it's journaling, whatever they take from it, it's a really kind of positive thing to leave the reader with, the young reader with. And that's something that I've really enjoyed about the book, because these resources, I think, are few and far between. From my experience, what you get is you get a lot of information, and then you'll get the human rights discourse, you'll get the state narrative, which obviously we all know is very problematic, but very very rarely do you kind of get the full picture of what took place, the horrors that were kind of rolled out by the state, and then how the Sikhs responded to that. So I think you've done a tremendous job in kind of intertwining all of that into the book. And I know that you've got a book launch planned for the end of the month. This podcast obviously will be coming out before that. Do you want to just share any details about that with those who are maybe listening and maybe they can attend?
Definitely. So, and thank you for the kind words. So I'm thrilled to announce that the official book launch for Manmeet Kaur will be on Saturday, May 31st at the Sikh Heritage Museum of Canada. It's located in Brampton, Ontario, just to the Greater Toronto neighborhood, and it's from 10:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. And it's gonna be filled with children's activities, for kids to draw in color, but also a chance for everyone to listen to a read aloud of the story in person and get a chance to meet me and purchase a copy of the book. What We're also donating a portion of the proceeds of the book sales to INSOF to ensure that the victims of 1984 are also remembered and not forgotten, and that there is some sort of justice that's being rendered um, with Manmeet Kaur's book, but also never forgetting our past and who we are today.
That's amazing. The In terms of the actual event itself, but even beyond the event, what are your broader kind of hopes for the book?
So my broader hopes for the book is, I know I was thinking a lot about this. Um, I truly hope that Manmeet Kaur brings forth a greater awareness about Sikhs, including our intersectional identities. All of us have different lived experiences based on where we're from. I hope that this book will be used by parents, families to teach their children a very important part of our history so that they can become change agents and advocate for justice, particularly those that were affected by the 1984 genocide. I also hope that schools can use this book as a resource so that all children have a better understanding of what it means to be Sikh, but also promote that critical cross racial solidarity. It's in community that we can bring forth a better world so those that aren't Sikh can also understand our Sikh identity. This book, so and so, so to say, is part of my legacy on Earth. We're only on this planet for a very brief period of time, and I'd like to make it a better world than the one I came in. And I forgot to mention earlier on the when the publishing of this book came to be, the what happened on the streets. So let me backtrack a bit. I was rejected by different publishing companies, a couple of them, and I was in reflective mode. There was a period of rest, let's say, and life gets in the way. Then in November of 2024, on the streets of Brampton, we saw right near the anniversary of the 1984 genocide, we saw mobsters of pro Indian extremists, nationalists marching on the streets of Brampton, Ontario, Canada, who wanted to storm our gurdwaras, who were calling for the murder of Sikhs, who were looking actively for kundas, any in the car, who were targeting cars with kundas, with anything to do with Sikh identity, and kicking cars and trying to really promote violence against the passengers within these cars. That was, it was, I have to think, I have to say, watching that produce such horror that, wow, is this really happening in 2024 at that time? That people, pro-Indian extremists, Indian agents are calling for the murder of Sikhs and are, have infiltrated within the Canadian democratic institution. That ignited another fire within me that I'm gonna try and get this story published. And that's when I reached out to Bulpreet.
Right.
So despite all the resistance, despite people, um, despite we have terrorists coming for the Sikh community and targeting us on our own Canadian soil, our voices will still continue to be heard.
Right. Yeah. I think that's such a really important point because often what you'll find is that when we talk about the Sikh genocide side, we just historicize the event. It's important to obviously acknowledge that it was an event, took place, and kind of give all the details of that. But the effects of that continue till this day. And you've made a really good reference to obviously what took place last year, in specifically in Toronto. But even prior to that, the killing of Hardeep Kaur, there's been multiple other assassination attempts. So this continues to affect Sikhs wherever we live. It's not just now within India, right? This is the term transnational repression has been coined, and there's been a lot of work done specifically within Canada that I'm sure you'll be aware of to highlight that. So I think what this book does for me is it just gives us another way, another kind of medium to tell our story and to own the narrative. And to push back against that rhetoric, which continuously, strives to kind of demonize us and criminalize Sikhs just for existing, just for being as we are. So I'm glad in many ways that that you kind of did something positive following that, and you recognize how important it was for this to go out there, and because you and I are of a generation that will have read about this, for quite some time now. But the younger generation, they may be coming to this, for the first time. You're seeing all this, especially in a day and age of social media where everything is instantly accessible. Seeing those goons, as they were, gangs, huddling and attacking the gurdwaras and what have you. So actually having as many resources as we can aimed at different target audiences, I think is hugely important. So again, it's really commendable. I was going to go on actually, and it kind of links into the point about social media. I was going to go on to ask you about how important you feel the written word is, especially in a day and age of, CGI and animation. I often ask authors this question because I think it's quite interesting to hear their take on it, especially with the way that AI has taken off in recent years. But how important is the art of narrating a story via the written word?
So as we know, technology is everywhere,
Yeah,
and I'm going to say I love saying elder millennial because I don't know. I I've been called a boomer, so or my age, I'm getting up there. Um, but I didn't grow up with technology and social media like today's youth are. So while animation, CGI, and AI all have significant parts and influence, I would argue that the narration of a story through the written and oral language and illustration is very critical. It just reminds me of simpler times. To this day, I have my own, I still have books from my childhood that I've kept away very nice and safe because uh, reading brought me so much joy. Even though I was a striving reader and then became a vivacious reader, and have a huge collection of books. Sure, we can read texts online, but it's not the same as holding a book and smelling
right.
it, the pages. For example, when I first got the copy of Manmeet Kaur, oh my goodness, just the quality and the feel of the pages. I
Right.
remember that even my brother was remarking on it, like, wow, it's so beautifully done. Um, it's a beautiful feeling to have your own library, your own, and of course you can have your own digital library, but it's a different type of feeling to have your own um, library with hardcover or softcover books. Um, and all the books that you've collected throughout the years, it's sort of like showing the different phases of your identity.
Right, right.
For example, for me, it was, let's say, Care Bears back in the day, and then
Right.
R.L. Stein, and so forth. So it shows a growth, your book collection, I would argue, with who you are as a person. So
Yeah,
well, CGI and AI um, all have their own significant attributes. I
sure.
would still say that there is like those are entry points that we can use, but the written and oral word is so important along with illustrations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would echo those as an elder millennial myself. I think I would definitely echo those thoughts because I think especially, I mean, obviously this book has illustration, right? So it's got full color, full page illustrations, which is great because of the target audience that it's aimed at. But I think just generally, a story book, an actual something that's written down, it just allows for more imagination. Like when you see something as an animation or whether it's CGI, however it's been created, you're kind of limited to viewing it through the imagination of the person who made it. Whereas when you read the story yourself, um, I think there's more depth to it, and those are the things that then stay with you as well. So, and like you've alluded to, it makes it very tangible as well because you've got a physical, you've got something there that you can keep and cherish. So that's amazing to hear as well. Um, the the other question I had was, so this book, obviously we've touched upon kind of how it covers the Sikh genocide and the themes that emerge from that, from the trauma to the resistance and the resilience. But another thing that this book does is it's representative of the Sikh identity. And I wanted to ask you kind of what your general thoughts are on representation, how important, perhaps as an educator, somebody who's worked within the schools and the schooling system, how important you think it is for a child to see characters that look like them.
Um, if you can also dive back into your childhood as well, because we're both elder millennials, I think both of us can agree we didn't see a lot of representation growing up. I know that in Toronto, in Canada at that time, it was it, it was so hard to see racialized characters within cartoons or just even sitcom shows. So I know myself, I grew up with a sense of shame almost. Shame with my name, Hardeep. I wanted my name to be changed. I remember even feeling profound shame at, oh my gosh, my name, and then also um, our Punjabi outfits as well. And you try to hide that aspect of it, which is really, really sad. And so it's super important for children to see characters that represent them and look like them in literature. Our names deserve to be highlighted. Our names deserve to be pronounced properly. And this is something that I am so important about within my classroom as an educator. So if I'm mispronouncing a student's name, I tell them, please correct me. You know, teachers also learn from their students as well, and teachers don't know it all. We are learning at the same time as everyone else. Our skin color deserves to be celebrated. Our racialized histories deserve to be centered. Um, while those that are against anti racist and anti oppressive work may claim that highlighting race invokes and it invites division, research actually suggests the opposite. And there's tons and tons of research to show how culturally relevant and responsive pedagogy, coined by Dr. Gloria Latson-Billing, actually really makes that connection between learning and student identity even stronger. So all children deserve to see themselves highlighted in school systems. It just brings not only joy, but excellence as well. So it's incredibly critical for children to see themselves in literature, but also not in the oppressed point of view,
Yeah.
who need to be saved. And I think this is where the white knight saviorism have like that comes into play. So being careful of that, but we have to center the joy and the resilience of all our students.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, again, I'd agree with that, and also I would add that what this book does as well is that it's a very kind of positive and authentic depiction as well. That it's not just like tokenism. It's not just showing Sikh identity for the sake of showing it, right? So like I know we spent a lot of time going back and forth with the illustration brief and with the illustrator, making sure that Gara was on, the stars were correct, and the Punjabi suits and all the rest of that, and making sure that it wasn't because I think I mean, now perhaps it's a bit different because we do have more Punjabi Sikh illustrators who will know what the differences are. But this particular illustrator, Ana Nicolau, who I've been working with for quite a while with Khalis House, this is something that's new to her. So even within that, this has kind of been learning for her as well. So I think, yeah, just not making it just tokenistic, or just putting something out there for the sake of it, but actually there's some kind of thought that's gone into this, which again I think is because I think children will see that as well. I think and my kids see it. I think they'll tell whether something is just there and it's just to appease them. Whereas if there's that sort of thought gone into it, they'll really relate to that, because then like I said, it makes it authentic. It makes it very real. So yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I wanted to ask you I know we've talked about kind of the broader issue that Sikhs face within Canada, especially in recent years, specifically from the Hindu kind of Indian nationalists. But what challenges do authors of books of this nature face today, generally speaking? You mentioned there that there were some hurdles going into mainstream publishing, but how about within your work setting and working as an educator? How does it affect you?
I think we're living in such a challenging time right now with so much pushback to diversity, equity, inclusion work. Any notion about race, like we see this in the United States, and it's trickling down, I know, in Canada. I've certainly seen it within the education system that I'm in. I've seen ignorance about Sikh identities as well. Uh, and so there are various challenges that books of this nature face and have faced from the past and continue to do so. It's hard to believe that in 2020, when the tragic murder of George Floyd was broadcasted for everyone to see through video, through images, and how anti racism, it seemed, was the fad. And I remember being in shock because when I was looking for a permanent teaching job many years ago, I was afraid to put that on my resume because, of course, there will be principals who will not hire you because of that.
Mm.
But then it became so popular for a few years. Look how far we were becoming so far, but now 2025, we've gone back so
Yeah.
much. It's like this backlash. by right-wing extremists, which the Canadian government has designated as a credible threat. However, we don't hear about it.
Right.
Um, we're also living in an age where fake news, where it's hard to differentiate between fact and opinion. So
Right.
people write articles in various national newspapers or local newspapers, and because it's the written word, people take it as fact without any research to back it up. And
Right.
unfortunately, that's what's selling today. And it's the attacks against DEI, EDI work is has definitely permeated within our school systems, where even though anti-racist education, anti-oppressive education in theory espouses the geopolitics need to be acknowledged. Now we have people, those that are resistant to anti-racist work, but also people who are Indian extremists, let's say from the government, or uh, let's say behind the scenes. They are claiming that we can't do anything in our classrooms as educators that have to do with geopolitics. And
Okay.
so, but that's what anti-racist work is about,
Of
right?
course.
But we are living in very dangerous times today, where equity work is seen as a threat, where white supremacy continues its terror, with where fake news permeates throughout that stratosphere. We're witnessing genocides in Gaza, Sudan, and Congo on social media, and racism goes unchecked, and yet we can't do anything.
Right.
So producing books of this nature is very difficult because we will face resistance, and that's just part and parcel of the work. Um, but we will face the harm of white supremacy, where brown and black bodies have been deemed disposable, continue to be deemed as disposable, and not as valuable. And we see that. And it's quite unfortunate because it's like no matter how much research, no matter how much credible data there is, um, for people to see that, look, if we introduce or incorporate culturally relevant, responsive education for students in schools, that it's good for achievement, belonging, and well-being. But people still continue to push back. So there's a lot of resistance. However, we must continue to persevere and promote justice, because even with the publication of this book, it was through community and solidarity that this was achieved. So if we continue to push forward, at the end of the day, we know we're doing the right thing. Um, Everything does fall in place.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think it's really important to acknowledge that those that pushback still exists within those spaces, because sometimes it can be uh, kind of taken as accepting that superiority complex, which it's not accepting. It's just kind of naming it and calling it out. And I think that's important work as well. As important as the disruption is, and owning our narrative, being unapologetic, but actually kind of acknowledging that those differences still exist is hugely important, because otherwise they kind of just get off, and no one continues to call them out. Like, I've seen that from a personal perspective within my workspace. So I work for, outside of Khalis House, I work for Scottish Government, and I've been there for a number of years. And actually, after the George Floyd killing, there was a lot of talk within our workspace about acknowledging it, and a lot of DEI work was kind of being rolled out as part of a DEI committee working group and stuff. And what I found was that even within those spaces, even in public sector spaces, sometimes it can just become very like a tick box exercise, and you've got to keep it genuine, you've got to keep it sincere. And I think what keeps it sincere is when you don't break the connection to it being political or geopolitical. And because if you do that, then it just becomes a tick box exercise, and you're not actually doing anything substantial or meaningful. So I think it is a fine line. But the key is to persevere and keep that going. Any authors who are maybe listening in, or watching, what advice would you give them? Any kind of aspiring authors who are perhaps writing, books of this nature? What would be your advice to them? Any kind of lessons learned in the last few months?
I would say don't give up on your dreams and continue to persevere. Um, Whenever you do something successful or try to do something successful and achieve something, there will always be pushbacks, and use those pushbacks to ignite a fire within to keep continuing on when it comes to especially writing books of pertaining to anti-oppressive education, identity work. Uh, just continue pushing the narrative and don't give up. There will be times where you'll feel like, okay, I just need to rest. And rest is actually, I'm learning this as well, part of the work as well. It's so important to rest. But after that moment of rest, get up and try again and just continue pushing, um, because your story deserves to be told. And maybe it'll be one incident that helps act as a catalyst to push you forward, just like how the catalyst for me was looking at the pro Indian extremist mobsters um, call for the killing of Sikhs in November 2024 in Canada. Use whatever it is that motivates you to continue trying harder, and don't give up.
It's amazing. Hardeep, you also mentioned a little while ago about the second book that you've written. Would you like to share with our viewers and listeners a bit about that? And obviously, I know what it's about, and the book is very much in the process of going through the illustration work. Please feel free to do so.
So I'm very excited. So this book, I wrote a few years ago, not as long as 20 years ago, but this one is it'll intertwine Sikh history and Canadian history. And I'm so super excited to release it because it's going to teach, it'll be used, I hope, as a resource for schools to center our Sikh history within the Canadian diaspora, Sikh pioneers, because we've been here since the late 1800s. And often I'm told by educators we don't have resources, and I don't know how to teach this. So I'm hoping that this book will be used as a tool to help educators within school systems to really teach about this, the history of a moment that happened to, would it be okay if I just say what the book
Absolutely. Yeah,
is?
yeah, please do.
Okay. I was like cliffhanger. So this book is it has to do with the Komagata Maru. And the Komagata Maru um, is a part of Canadian history where it was a ship led by a Sikh man called Gurdeep Singh, and predominantly Sikh passengers, but also Hindu and Muslim passengers. And they were docked on the shores of Vancouver, coming from a continuous journey that came from, I believe, Singapore, Japan, stopped in Punjab, and they were on their way to Canada and stopped on the docks of Vancouver. However, they were not allowed inside the country. So again, again, this book speaks to how the disposability of racialized bodies, and how our prime minister, which he said back in the day, he wanted a white man's country. So this book really dives deeper into the Komagata Maru and what it's about, but also written in a way to captivate younger audiences. Whereas Manmeet Kaur, it really targeted the junior grades, meaning grades 4 and 5 or ages 10 and 11 and up. This book can be accessible to kids 10 and younger. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, I've seen the images and I've read the story, and I'm excited as well. But it is very much the book will be very similar to Manmeet Kaur in the sense of the illustrator is the same, the kind of it flows in the same way, similar sort of page count. And we'll be making an announcement probably in the next couple of weeks about when that book will be available. But yeah, no, I think it'll be a great resource, not just for teachers and non-Sikhs, but also for Sikh families, because I think in many ways, the Komagata incident is for some reason, it's not really well known within our own communities. I think maybe it's different in Canada because it happened there, but certainly in the UK, like I didn't hear anything about it when I was growing up. We heard about 84, we heard about other events from our history. And it could be that just generally speaking, the kind of the turn of the 19th century, that sort of era is very, it's not as widely accessible in terms of, learning about it. But I think it'd be a really good resource for Punjabi Sikh families as well, to read together with children. So I think it'll be another great resource, and I'm looking forward to the publication of that one as well. Okay, Deep, I don't have any more questions for this kind of episode. Are there any closing thoughts you'd like to share with us, or anything you'd like to leave the viewers and listeners with?
I just want to say thank you so much for your time and listening to this. And Ranveer, thank you so much for your time and for giving me the opportunity to publish Manmeet Kaur along with the other upcoming book. But it takes a community to really, just center our voices and our narratives. And I think, like I said before, we're living in very challenging times today where overt racism is on display and where policies are being rewritten constantly, it seems, to cater to those that are against EDI and DEI work. But Manmeet Kaur, I hope, is a book that people can use not only to learn about Sikh identity, promote critical cross-racial solidarity, but also um, it's a way for justice to permeate, to learn about justice, to learn about what that actually looks like, and what it means when identity affirming books are available for our children, for all children to read up on, and how can we make the world a better place than the one that we came in. And there will always be resistance, but that means you're doing something right, whenever there's a resistance. So I will just leave it as that. I hope Manmeet Kaur teaches all of us how to heal, persevere, resist, and love. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, no, thank you. Like, with Khalis House, this is the reason why Khalis House was started to be a platform for exactly this type of book. So, when we receive proposals like we did from yourself, it just makes our job so much easier because we literally just put it through the actual process and get it out there. And just on that point, so the book is available to order from the Khalis House website. But for those of you who are listening from the States and from Canada, it is being put onto Amazon as well. There was just a slight hold up on our end, but it should be up there very soon. So we'll be sharing details of that once it's up. So that'll be across Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, or your local kind of Amazon market. It'll be available to purchase from there as well. So we'll keep you posted on that.
I also want to just remind everyone that yes, because we're living in such challenging times, we are seeing the broadcast of genocides from Gaza, from Sudan, from Congo happening right before our very eyes, where we're seeing images of blown up babies, we're seeing videos of blown up families. And it's incumbent that we all engage collectively in solidarity to ensure that this does not happen again to anyone. So this is my plea for a better world.
I think I would echo those thoughts. I think the other thing is, with social media, um, like it's everywhere, isn't it? So I mean, anytime you go onto Instagram or Twitter or any kind of platform, it's very difficult to avoid as well. Not that we should be avoiding it, but I think because it's there for everyone to see, sometimes we can have develop this kind of, oh, it's just happening, and it's something that becomes there in the background. And as a result of that, you don't want to maybe engage with it because it is so horrific. You're constantly seeing, schools, hospitals, mosques being targeted, and it can become very easy just to kind of turn off. But I think it's important, like you've just said there, to acknowledge that these atrocities continue to take place, and where we can, we should be amplifying the voices of those who are affected. So thank you, yeah, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, thank you, Hardeep, for taking the time out to join me for this episode. And you will stay in touch, obviously, and I'm sure we'll maybe connect again for another episode discussing the Komagata Maru book once that's out. But yeah, thank you once again, and all the best with the launch event at the end of the month.
Thank you. Thank you. And of course, yes, we will definitely be back again to discuss the next book.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.